Parents. Ooh boy. I think no one really talks about this whole growing up after you grew up. You've gotten older and you just kind of like, how do I grow up now with my parents? I think it's such an important subject because no one really stops learning and no one stops growing. So it's important to know how to keep improving those relationships. This video is not a rant. It's not me giving the finger to all the parents out there. This is a video for you who might have been run down by your family or feel like you've been run down. And maybe you're curious about what you can do and what your parents can do to better our relationship with our parents. Okay, so now that we've got all that out of the way, I want to kind of start by telling my own story with my parents. I'm gonna make this long story a very short one. My mom and dad split when I was 3. I lived with my mom, who lived in the other side of the country than my dad. So I had 3.5 hours between them. I moved to my dad's when I was 13 and I didn't really know what I was signing up for. I needed to kind of try that. It didn't work out the way I really wanted to. So I actually moved back to my mom's when I was 15. That really created just a huge fallout with my dad, which made us not speak to each other for 6 months. Then I book a trip. I'm gonna travel for like 3 months, which ended up being 6 months. And that kind of shifted everything for me. You know, I got out, I saw the world. I realized that the world was bigger than the small town I lived in with my mom. I widened my perspective and I did come back like a newer person, which is so weird to say, but it really just does something to you when you actually see the world for what it is. So when I got back, I visited my dad, and I think there was just like a shift in energy. Both he and I had grown so much in those 6 months, and you know, suddenly we realized that we kind of both wanted our relationship to work, to whereas it wasn't just gonna be that formal small talk. It would just kind of be small talk and then we would go separate ways. Like I would go to my room and he would go to his cars and dad things. But I think we actually wanted to figure out how we could make a relationship between us work. Today, my dad and I have never been better. Like we have such a fun relationship really, because I finally saw him for who he is and not who I thought he was. Oh, and side note, weekly affirmation will be in the end of this video, per usual. So I want to just make clear that there are actual tangible things you can do to improve your relationship with your parents. The first one is to understand that no one ever stops growing. I think for a lot of parents, they can have limiting beliefs about what you can do, and the same goes the other way around. Don't box your parent up with your own limiting beliefs. They can still do whatever they want to. They can still grow and be the people they want to be. I think as the kids, we're always like, you're the adult. I know who you are. You've been showing me this for the past XX years. I am the only one who can grow because I am growing up the traditional way, right? But I think it's so important to also know that your parents are growing as well. Second thing, your parents can't give you something that they don't have. If you're blaming your parents for your current situation that you're sitting in right now, honey, we've got a problem. Yeah, maybe back then everything could have been handled better, but they did what they thought was right. They did what they thought was best with the resources they had. And when I say resources, I'm not only talking about money. I'm talking about emotional intelligence. I'm talking about awareness. I'm talking about meaningful relationships. We've all learned a heck of a lot from our parents, and you can use that information as you want to. But if you keep dwelling on the same problem and you're living in the past and blaming your parents, you're not going to go very far. You can choose to upgrade yourself so that you one day, or maybe today, you can give your kids a different perspective. But just remember that you can't give something that you don't have. Third thing, take the first step. This is something I learned the hard way by not speaking to my dad for 6 months. I think what's definitely important to remember is that now we're all adults. Even though you're technically the child and your parents are your parents, you shouldn't be acting like the child. You all have the same responsibility to kind of reach out to each other and build that relationship. Try to tell them how you feel, give them a sincere compliment, buy them coffee, give them a hug, like be the first one to take that step. I promise you that your relationship is going to improve so much when you actively show interest in them. Number 4, something that really changed for me was when I learned what my parents' love language were. And I think when people hear the words love language, they immediately think of like romantic partners. But truth is that we have a love language for our family, for our friends, yes, for our romantic partners, and for our parents. It's important to know so you can actually start speaking their language. So for anyone who doesn't know what love language is, we have 5 major ones: quality time, act of service, receiving gifts, physical touch, and words of affirmation. And maybe just from hearing that, maybe you already have a sense of what your parents' love languages could be. My dad's is quality time. So I make sure that every time I visit him, we do something fun, cooking, grabbing coffee. We've been to the gym a couple of times together, but just making sure that we, just the two of us, go spend that time together where we can really connect. For my mom, it's a mix of words of affirmation and acts of service. So she really loves when chores are handled for her, like vacuuming, emptying the dish, like those small things. She always loves telling her children how much she loves us. And for her, that's also her love language, to hear that back. So I've been trying to say it first. So you have to give back what you expect. I will say though that supporting and agreeing is like 2 different things. You can support them fully, but not be in 100% agreement with what they're doing. And I remember this from when I traveled, and I told my mom like, hey, going to South America for 6 months, like traveling around. And she was just like, like she's never been traveling. So all she knew was what she saw in the news every night, so of course the first thing in her head was like drugs and kidnapping. And I told her like, that's not gonna hold me back. Like I'm gonna go do my thing. And even though she didn't agree with my decision, she was my number 1 support through my whole travel. Maybe out of fear. It's just to say that like, you can support them. You don't have to agree with what they're doing, but just make sure that they know that you're there to support them. I really hope that I achieved finding some common ground for us. And I would love to know if you have had any struggles with your parents, or if you had like a transition where you've been struggling and now your relationship is healthier. I would love to know it all. You can write a comment, you can DM me, and then let's get moving with the affirmation. So this week's affirmation is, I am so happy and grateful now that I'm focusing on giving back love, respect, and caring to my parents, and I'm creating a space for them to be their best authentic selves. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next Sunday.